And taking a second. Just setting up the meeting. And we are live.
Okay, perfect. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at this virtual book party to celebrate the shots you take. My name is Ariana. I'm the events coordinator here at Love Sweet Arrow, and I have the great pleasure of introducing both authors with me today. First, starting off, of course, we have the lovely Rachel Reed. Rachel is the USA Today bestselling author of the Game Changers hockey romance series, as well as the standalone hockey romance novels Time to Shine and, of course, The Shots You Take. She lives in Nova Scotia, Canada. She has always lived there, and it's looking like she probably always will. She has two boring degrees and two interesting kids. So, welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
And then And then next, we have the lovely author Katie Casey. Katie Casey is a writer and baseball enthusiast. Her books have been featured in the New York Times, Iowa Public Radio, Book Riot, among other publications. Her second novel, Fire Season, was named a New York Times Best Romance Book of 2022. And other genres, her horror short story, The Last Plague, was longlisted for Best Horror of the Year, number 14. She has also written for a variety of baseball analysis websites, including Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus. She believes in high socks, unbuttoned jerseys, and the designated hugger, not the designated hitter. Welcome, Rachel and Katie. So lovely to have you both today. I know everyone is probably super eager to hear both of your conversations, but just getting into a few logistic items before we get started. Katie and Rachel will have about a 45-minute to an hour conversation. During that time, all of you can go ahead and put any of your questions you would like to ask Katie or Rachel in the YouTube chat, and they will either answer them towards the end of the event or sporadically, whatever they so choose. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap up after that hour. Okay, if that sounds good, Katie, Rachel, I will leave it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to Love Sweet Arrow for hosting this. We're excited to talk about sad sportsmen
Yeah,
who love
favorite
each
thing.
other, which, yes, honestly, are favorite things. Um, so I think before we kind of dive into some of the questions, for people who don't know, I'm sure most people bought the book and then inhaled it in maybe like 18 to 24 hours. Uh, Perhaps the way I did. But for folks who haven't, what is the shots you take actually about?
It's about two retired NHL defensemen who are both 41 now, and one of them lives in his hometown in Nova Scotia, which is a fictional small town, kind of village by the sea in Nova Scotia. And his kind of he had like a falling out like 12 years ago with his former best friend, line mate, like defensive partner slash, you know, friend with teammate with benefits. um, yeah, the love of his life, basically. And they haven't spoken for 12 years, but then I should say the character's names probably, that'll make it easier. Riley, the guy who lives in Nova Scotia, his dad dies suddenly. And so the other guy, Adam, shows up for the funeral after they haven't spoken for 12 years. So things just go from there.
The whole book, the first part of or I guess the now part of the book takes place over like a few
Like a
days
week.
at the
Yeah, like
beginning.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's short.
So super compressed timeline, but then going back 15 years in their past, 20 years in their
Yeah,
past.
I think the oldest flashback, yeah, it's probably like 20 years ago, something like that. But there's different flashbacks at different times. Yeah. So there's
I had to recalibrate in my mind how old a rookie is in hockey versus a rookie in baseball. Because like
very
a
young.
rookie in baseball can rent a car. Like they are middle-aged in hockey, but yeah,
Oh
they
yeah.
start as as babies in hockey.
It can be
Um,
18, yeah. Not that many start that young, but it's definitely possible.
so a book that takes place over both like 20 years and 5 days, essentially.
Yeah, basically. So Yeah, and then a little bit into the future too. So, um, yeah, but yeah, the vast majority of the story is a very short amount of time, which is kind of tricky, but kind of has its advantages too, because I don't know. It took me a long time to settle on that time frame. I was gonna have Adam stick around for like a month, or I didn't know. Like I was like originally, I think in the synopsis it was like he was gonna be hanging out for weeks, but I felt like the pacing was just better if I tightened it up. Because what is he
Yeah,
gonna be doing?
working at the store because
Yeah, like
Riley's family owns a store.
yeah. So there's like a sporting goods store that he helps out with, but yeah, I was like he has to do this stuff quickly because otherwise there's no reason for him to be there.
Well, so I guess this kind of takes us to like this felt like a book that had like a real sense of place to it, right? So it's in Nova Scotia. Um, that is the Maritimes, correct?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to
Yep.
be an ignorant American. And so it's in Nova Scotia in this like small, as you said, fictional town. It felt like your most. I know Tough Guy takes place in Toronto, right?
Hmm.
But this felt like your most like Canadian, like grounded in place kind of book. As a side note, do people from Toronto say Toronto, or is that just Buck Martinez, who is the Blue Jays commentator?
I say Tor- Toronto. So there's no
Okay.
second T. I was like, I have to think about it. When I think about it, I'll say it weird. But yeah, Toronto is typically how Canadians say it. I do know Canadians say Toronto as if it's TR. That I would say, yeah, if you're speaking completely without thinking about it, you might just say Toronto.
Toronto. Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
that
it's
that
like
is how I say it actually. I'm like, yeah, Toronto Maple Leafs. We just ignore
yeah,
all the letters.
it's like Baltimore. People from Baltimore say Baltimore. Like they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah.
There's not a T to be found anywhere.
If we can remove the
Uh,
letter, we will.
but this is in a small town in Nova Scotia, and it feels like very kind of grounded in place. And obviously, you're from Nova Scotia,
Yep.
and sort of for life. How did how did you kind of think about sort of setting something there? Sort of what considerations did you have? What felt different from your previous books?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was nice because it felt more. Um, I don't know. Like I just kind of knew more what I was writing about than when well, especially when I was setting things in New York. I was like, I mean, I've been to New York a few times, but I've never lived in New York. I've never, been more than a tourist in New York. So I felt like a bit of a fraud trying to like capture that. But I mean, that is a city that's portrayed in so many movies and television shows. But at least this, it felt like something I knew. Although I live in like the capital city of Nova Scotia, so I do not live in a small seaside town. Um, so I'm not pretending to be super knowledgeable about that, but like I thought it would be make most sense to create a town kind of based on an amalgam of different Nova Scotia towns that I love, and I placed it on the North Shore, which I think is an underrated shore of Nova Scotia, and it's kind of like a little isolated too compared to some of the other. It's not on one of the major highways, so um, yeah, you have to kind of go on some smaller roads to get there. So that's why I chose it. And yeah, I just really enjoyed kind of, I don't know, writing something that was familiar to me, and also hopefully maybe making people interested in maybe visiting Nova Scotia and like make it sound like a pretty nice place.
It definitely sounds nice to me. I don't know what the weather is like, but
Similar to
seems
Maine.
good. Okay,
Yeah,
seems reasonable.
yeah.
Um, it does feel like from where you said it, felt like that you needed to have like a fantasy style map at the beginning of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have done that. Like, maybe I'll add that to my blog or something. Like it's here.
It's
And here's some
here.
photos of towns that look kind of like it.
Was there any like Nova Scotian thing that you like, if you're like, I have to add this?
I think there's like a little kind of restaurant that is featured quite a bit in it, and that particular type of restaurant is something that you'll see all over the Maritimes. Like I don't know, just like a very country, like has lots of fish and chips and like other deep, like fried seafood and stuff is probably especially, but also like home cooked meals, but also they bake their own bread and make really good pie and like, but it's really small. It's probably kind of dumpy. Also, the bar in the town was really familiar to me. Like it's not nice at all. It's quite gross, but it's like I think it's also something you would drive by quite a bit in the Maritimes, maybe less so than you used to. Like maybe 10 years ago, you would have seen more of them because now we have like most places, a huge boom of microbreweries and stuff like that that are kind of taking over places and like gastropubs and like kind of fancier things. So the old bars are getting bought up and turned into nicer places. So
That bar, by the way, is like speaking of sense of place, it's viscerally gross. I'm gonna say, like, I can like smell the floor
oh
in
yeah,
that bar just from your descriptions of it.
yeah, like yeah, I wouldn't want to hang out in there for too long, but I definitely have hung out in that place for too long.
It very much to me. So I'm not from Pittsburgh, but my family's from there, and I went to school there. And like, there's these like bars that are like in row houses essentially in Pittsburgh, and it's always in someone's basement, and it's run by like a bartender who got like pre-installed with the bar. And there's always like an inch and a half of beer on the floor, and you don't eat the food, and that like it felt very like
Yeah,
comfortingly familiar, but also I don't necessarily want to smell it.
yeah, I think well, Nova Scotia is like a pretty blue collar place for the most part. So it's a lot of industry based on natural resources and things like that. So yeah, very, very similar kind of like working man type bars and restaurants and things like that in the smaller towns especially.
Well, I think it really works in terms of having this just like sense of place. I don't know if you're going to see like a Rachel Reed related like tourism boom.
No,
Like,
I could do those tours, like be one of those authors that's like, come to Nova Scotia and tour with me in my castle.
uh, honestly, I mean, people, I don't want to put that out in the universe in case people are like, all right, we're in the car, we're coming over. We want to go to a gross bar and then eat some good pie. And also go to the farmer's market. The farmer's
Oh
market
yeah,
features very heavily in this.
I love a farmer's market.
Um,
Yeah, that market was probably a little too good for April in Nova Scotia, but I tried to keep the products possible for April here, which is like no produce, um, just honey, maple
just
syrup, and like smoked fish. That's what you get.
what more do you need, honestly?
Yeah.
Um, I think ours are probably at this point because like I'm down in Maryland, so it's a chicken farming state, so it's going to be like the most expensive egg you've ever seen, and that's about it at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, well, this is sort of, I think we've already touched on this, but to just really unpack it more. So, like, this is your first second chance romance. So, like, who is it? Ryan, and is it Fabian or Fabian in your brain?
I say Fabian because that's how I've heard
Okay.
that name pronounced the
Okay.
most. Yeah.
So Ryan and Fabian like were billeted together. Like Ryan was billeted with Fabian's family, and they sort of had like a oh, I'm looking at you kind of like teenage thing, but like it's not a
Yeah.
second chance
No, because they were
romance.
kids. Yeah. Like this
So
is
like
more. This is like they actually used to hook up and had a real passionate thing that they didn't talk about. Um, yeah, so this is really my first real second chance romance, which I think, I think Diamond Ring was a huge influence because I read that and I was like, oh yeah, these are the vibes. It's like I love like a really good second chance romance, and I think it's a really challenging thing to write because right off the bat you're gonna have people that just aren't. You have to make it so the characters, or at least one of the characters, does something pretty bad, but can be redeemed. And I think like right off the bat, you will have readers that are not going to forgive at least one of the characters. Like they just won't. Either something similar happened to them in their past, or they just, it's just like a no for them. So I think it's like a tricky thing to write and kind of a risky thing to try to do. And I do think a lot of times, like when I read second chance romances, I definitely feel that too. A lot of times I'll be like, oh no, they shouldn't be together. They were right the first time. And maybe even like with this book, I'm like, maybe they really shouldn't be together, but it's like it doesn't matter because they're gonna make stupid decisions about each other forever. Like, but yeah, I enjoyed the challenge of it, but yeah, it is. I mean, it's it's tricky because you do have to make them behave pretty badly and then earn that person back. Like you have to make it so that they're worth forgiving.
Yeah, and I think you did Big Fight very well. Like I always think of Second Chance. So I've written three books that are like full length books, and two of them are Second Chance. So like it is my like that is my forever trope. That is like the thing I just like love, and really like love portraying. And I think like one of the things, as you said, is like you have to make them like mean enough to each other that you understand not talking like 12 years,
Yeah, exactly.
12 years.
Yeah.
But it can't be so bad that like I mean, I have exes that I'm like, if I ever see them into the ocean,
Yeah,
parody,
exactly.
parody.
I also feel
Um,
like as I've gotten older, like into my 40s, I forgive people more things that they did in their 20s, like grudges I was holding. I was like, they were young. But I mean, something, not everything, but like some things I've softened on a bit with people I know. So I feel like I wanted to make sure that, because I think like if they had done all the bad things when they were like both 35, I'm like, well, that's it. They're fully formed.
yeah, your
But
prefrontal cortex in your 20s is like, I'm here, but I'm not. I'm making decisions, but I'm not. And
yeah,
yeah, I understand. And like, yeah, and Diamond Ring, they're together when they're like 20, 21, 22. So they're really young. And then it's a long gap. It's like 10 years. And then like just being 30, 31, 32, like you're like, oh, my brain has like rationality. Like I can
yeah.
like, yeah, not to anyone who is in their 20s, like please
No,
go
no.
out, have fun,
We
like
all
go
go through
outside.
it. We all go through it.
But yeah, so I think that you do a really good job, particularly with like showing how sort of like messy and hurtful and like just terrible that big fight that they have can be. And I don't know how into spoilery territory we want to get and sort of how messy that breakup can be, but also really like you you get why they're sort of like why both parties are acting this way. You get sort of like, because you always do such a wonderful job with like the hockey environment, like you get why within the hockey environment they're acting that way. um I don't know, what was like your thinking of like, did you have like a draft where you were like, oh nope, gotta pull that one back, or like
Yeah, I
gotta kind
think.
of make it worse?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying all that about the book. But that's a relief. But yeah, oh man, this book really fought me. I had a lot of different versions of this book. At first, I thought like maybe I need to go back and tell their entire relationship from when they were in their 20s and then go back to instead of just doing a few flashbacks. Um, but then I was like, because I was like, maybe I need to make sure that you see a lot of their good times as well, because I don't show as much of the good time. I show a bit, but like, I was like, maybe it's not like maybe it needs that. Maybe you need to see what they were like. But I was like, I guess the point though is that they weren't like that great. It was like now they're ready to be really good together. So, um, yeah, I in the fight, like a lot of the scenes in the book where they're saying mean things to each other, I rewrote a lot because I kept saying like, is that too mean? Like you don't want to cross that unforgivable line, and especially with Riley because he really isn't happy to see Adam at all, and he's very stubborn about it for a long time. So I was like, okay, when does he soften a bit, or like when does he start to like put his walls down a little bit? So it took me a while to figure out the best points to do that, and yeah, I did find that stuff tricky because you don't want to rush it because otherwise it's like it's not really much point to the book. They just see each other again and are like, "I'm sorry, okay," and then they get back together.
Yeah, and I think you did that without necessarily like so the issue is, and I guess we're gonna like I guess people who are worried about spoilers like earmuffs. But you know, in the book, sort of like Riley and Adam are hooking up at when they are defensemen together, like Stanley Cup winning defensemen together. And basically Riley is a lot clearer in his feelings for Adam than Adam is for Riley. And to the point where Riley rightly feels like jerked back and forth. Riley is eventually he's traded to Dallas, or did he sign
Yeah,
with
he
Dallas?
requested. Yeah.
Okay, so
Over the summer.
he requested trade to Dallas. He ends up in Dallas. He kind of falls apart a little bit, and then
Yeah.
he eventually decides to leave hockey. And so you sort of have this with, and from Riley's like point of view, like, you know, he feels really like manipulated and a little bit like bruised, and then Adam has shown up at obviously a really sensitive time because it's at Riley's father's funeral,
Yeah.
but you avoid big grovel, and I kind of really love that as a decision, right? Like, so you could have Adam show up and like cry and grovel and all of that, but you don't do that. So like what was sort of your thinking in terms of like making like Adam, I guess, forgivable without like
Yeah.
the big grovel?
I wanted to, yeah, make sure it's clear that he's sorry and he wants to help and he cares and he wants to fix things. But also, yeah, like I think setting it all during this really uncomfortable time around the sudden death of a parent is like there's only so much, like he can't show up and be like, so my whole life is different and I was thinking maybe we should be together. It's like it's just not the time. So it's like it's the time to just kind of help as much as you can and show that you've maybe learned a few things over the years and have figured some stuff out. So yeah, I liked the idea of it not being like, and also I wanted, I guess, Adam to be like a little mad at Riley too. So it kind of creates little bit of tension there too. So he's looking for his own kind of explanation or apology. So he's not quite ready to grovel completely yet.
And yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like he can't go and like take up all the energy in the
That'd be
room.
awful. That would be more unforgivable, I think, if he showed up and made it all about him at his father's funeral. Like
Into the Atlantic. You have a lot of Atlantic Ocean
terrible.
like
Oh,
that you
easy.
have
Like,
access to.
yeah, you can take a step in any direction.
I mean, in the book, they're on a boat. I mean, it's very easy. So anyway,
Yeah.
this is getting into a strange place. So this is also like, and I know I just talked about sort of like their on ice career together, but like there's not a lot of hockey in the book. It's
No.
mostly in flashback. Like, how was that to write? Like, how did it kind of feel
Oh,
different?
awesome. I'm so glad to like I know I felt like I warned, my publisher, everybody, I was like, there's not really a lot of hockey in it. Like when they're trying to figure out the cover and stuff. And they were like, oh, we'll put a hockey jersey and a hockey stick on the cover. And I was like, I was like, you might not want to oversell the hockey in this book. There's not a lot of on-page hockey at all. In fact, there's like basically none, like a tiny, tiny bit. It's not really the focus, but I really liked writing a book that was like adjacent to hockey without actually having to write like, you know, fake games, like imaginary games. Sometimes I find that's the hardest part of writing hockey romance, like the kind of like the play-by-play stuff. Um, and that's why usually my hockey scenes are dialogue heavy because I find that more interesting than describing a play. But yeah, it was nice to kind of be able to write outside the constraint of a hockey season, especially, and a schedule that they would have, and all of that. So I really liked writing something that was, still in my wheelhouse, but but gave me a little more freedom to do stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned scheduling. I feel like writing something where one of the parties is not traveling half the time, like half the time for half
Hmm.
the year, they're like getting dinner at a reasonable hour. Like there's a suspicious number of afternoon baseball games in my books because I'm like,
Yeah.
look, they just work 13 hours a day. Like
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know.
So
Like my hockey players go out for long hours after games, and I'm like, I don't know how often they're really doing that. Like probably some of the younger guys, but it's like I'm sure they're exhausted.
yeah, I think like at home asleep and then
Yeah.
having weird sleep schedules. So that sounds like it's really liberating.
Yeah, it was nice. And I liked writing about, guys who were closer to my age because I'd just written like Time to Shine was about very young guys, so they were like
Mhm.
23, 24. And that was my first book about teammates. So it was like the first time I could write a book where the guys had the same schedule, which was like I've always had these books where the hockey player has to leave town for long stretches, and the other guy you have to figure out what he's doing at that time. It's making it harder on myself, but like this was nice to just have like a week or so these two 40-something-year-old guys reconnecting, no schedule. It was good.
No one has to eat 8,000 calories a day, which
Nope,
I
they
think
can.
probably takes a lot of time.
Yeah, they can just eat whatever they want.
Um, so yeah, and I will say I am going through that. What I'm currently writing is the least baseball book, like the least baseball-y baseball I've written. And you're absolutely right. I'm like, oh, this is so liberating in a lot of ways because like one of them is a former player. I couldn't get that far from the game, but like he has a more or less like normal human schedule, and like isn't on planes all the time and all of that stuff. But what I found in sort of doing that writing is like the baseball parts of the book, and I think for you the hockey parts of your book kind of become like symbolically load bearing, right? You can like show like their emotional state through sports, and
Yeah.
that without sort of incorporating that you don't have that as an avenue. Did you have sort of other, I mean obviously you have other ways to show it, but like what sort of had to take over for the hockey to kind of have that same emotional kind of heft?
Yeah, it's true. Those scenes do a lot of heavy lifting sometimes. So, I think with this one, I used the store a lot as a thing that I kept going back to. That was sort of like being at the rink, I guess it would be kind of replacing maybe like hockey practice or something like that. That was like there were some. I have some fixed scheduled things that happen in the book over that week, so you know that things are coming up in a couple days that they're doing together. So those kind of events, I guess, sort of replace the games, um, and then I think just a lot of arguing and fighting would have replaced the kind of energy from like a hockey game, and then some flashbacks too kind of provided some of it as well.
Yeah, I do. I will say like there is hockey together in the flashbacks.
Tiny bit of hockey,
I little like you passed a bottle of
one
hockey over
one or
it.
two, yeah, yeah, one paragraph
um
of hockey.
as a treat.
Yeah,
I
in the
feel like
hockey book,
Riley's bring that in the hockey book. Yeah, I mean,
just enough to get it on in that category.
you know, I again like because I'm also just like thinking this is like really top of mind for me in sort of drafting my own book, but like readers at this point like they know your world, they know sort of the world building that you have, even though this is like a standalone. But like the idea that like hockey is this like and particularly hockey in those flashbacks is this like incredibly like structurally homophobic environment,
Hmm.
right? You don't have to necessarily like sell that as part of like the book. Like people sort of accept it in the world building. And so like the hockey part of the book is just like that you have this like very high intensity, high stress, structurally homophobic environment in which you have these two people who like maybe are a little in love, but like can't then be in love. So I think that's the hockey I saw in the book
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's still very much hockey culture is very much a big part of the book. So it's like the specter of hockey and the effects of hockey, like not just when they were playing in the pro hockey, but like the way that they were raised, the way that they were like conditioned. Um, and then how it affects their life after, the expectations on them after. So I mean, hockey's in Canada, and in a lot of other places, is like the culture is so strong and so kind of rigid that it really does shape a lot, like most of the young men like in an area. Like it's just even if you don't actually play hockey, I think you're like that hockey mentality is very much synonymous with masculinity here. So um and obviously that is not great in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I did say like, oh well, 15 years ago in flashbacks, but I know, hockey has had like one out player. Pro hockey has
Yeah,
had
a
pro
prospect
hockey.
player. Yeah,
Yeah.
hasn't
It
played in the NHL yet, but
yeah. He's in the AHL. This
AHL,
is
which
Luke
is that's
Prokhorov.
decent. We're getting somewhere.
Yeah, baseball's like, and we're not going to get into the history of sort of like gay players in baseball. I did a TikTok series, but like it's pretty similar that there's been like much more sort of like contemporarily like players in the minors who have come out, but
Hmm.
nobody in the majors. And I think probably for relatively similar reasons.
Yeah,
Which is like,
I'm
yeah.
optimistic that it will change, but I don't know. I still think it's
Uh-oh. Uh, am I frozen or is everyone else frozen?
You're
you're
frozen for
you're
me.
fine now. You're frozen now. Oh, maybe not.
Let's try that again. Are we back? Now Rachel
Okay,
is
you're good.
freezing.
Oh no, am
Uh,
I freezing?
no, I think we're good. I can turn my camera off. I was like, people are not here to see me. So I can turn my camera off if I need to.
It seems okay
But
right now.
just in turn, okay. Well, back to symbolically load bearing. Can we talk about Riley Tuck's house? Can I talk
Oh yeah,
about how I want to move into this house?
yeah. That's just my dream house. That's like all it is. Yeah, that's like the best house that I
Um,
could think of.
yeah, I'm
And
gonna try that with the
something you'd
camera.
legitimately see. Definitely buy old houses and make them really nice if they have the money and the ability to do that. So
Um, I'm gonna try this with the camera off for a minute, just because I
yeah,
think
sure,
my
no problem.
internet's being a little cranky. Um, First of all, if people haven't read the book, the house is like lovingly and meticulously described. So like I almost like I'm moving into this house. This is obviously like the best house. What research did you do to like
Uh,
create this house?
I looked at a lot of. I mean, I like antiques myself, so I just like I made Riley really into antiques, and and kind of building a room around one, which I'm not great at that, but I wish I had that talent. There's there was a show on HGTV Canada where a group of people kind of bought up houses in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, and like restored them and made them really beautiful. And I like to watch a lot of episodes of that. I can't remember the name of the show, but it's really good. Pretty much everybody's queer on the show, so it's cool. But yeah, all of those houses are restored in a way that like preserves the history of the house. So I like that, and I love a wood shingle house. So um, I don't live in a house that's anything like any of that, but um, it's the dream.
One of the questions in the chat is if there is an inspo board, like a Pinterest for the house.
Oh yeah. No, but I do have some photos that I saved in a folder. I think I still have them. Maybe I could share those somewhere, but I don't know if they're like great references. Usually I would just be kind of looking at like different rooms. I looked at a lot of like seaside cottage type houses, and um yeah, and I saved like a few images of kind of what I wanted, but I had a hard time finding exactly what I was. So I think the house is like largely just in my head, but there's probably a few images.
I'm gonna try with camera back on and see if that has like resolved the problem. Um, I'm a little jealous if you could come up with like that house in your mind. I am always like, if there's a house in my books, it's I went on Zillow, where
Yeah,
millennials go. And like I am describing for the most part like a real house.
yeah, I'm
Um,
actually really bad at describing things. So I know, like for Casey's house in Time to Shine, that was totally a house that I found on a Calgary real estate website, like that I was describing because I'm not great at that stuff. And I think most of the houses in my books were ones I found on real estate websites. But this one I couldn't find the house that I because they're not for sale. Like people keep them. So I was looking at some that were like vacation rentals because those are sometimes nice old houses that are done up, but they weren't really done in the way that I wanted them to be. Like I wanted it to be lush and full of antiques and floral prints and like yeah, like really vibrant colors and um that's not usually the vibe for rentals. It's more minimal. So I was like looking at lots of things, but yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely a dream home for me.
there was an article, I feel like it was in Slate maybe a year or two ago, and it was about characters' houses in romance books and like the sort of like sad undecorated, I can say a word, um state of those houses and like how that like reflects the sort of like internal life of the characters. And I thought it was just really well done, where you have like Riley's like internal life is sort of like rebuilt in a lot of ways through this house. And so I just thought it was like a neat bit of like symbolism, but also like a place I want to move into.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was like, I mean, it kind of shows not only him living the way he'd always wanted to live then, and it's very much a statement of who he is as a man, but also like that he got a lot of help with he did the renovations himself with help from friends and family, so it shows like that he's part of he's very capable and dreamy and able to remodel a house, so, which I think makes him very attractive to me anyway.
I thought it just did like a great job of yes, showing how he rebuilt his life and just like I was like for
And a
once
house
a and a house. And
metaphor.
like metaphor, yes. But like just not having a male romance character whose house is like chrome and greige.
Yeah, because sometimes I intentionally do give like I think like Scott Hunter in the first book in Game Changer his he had a very nice you know condo or penthouse type thing, but like it was under decorated because he hadn't really done much with it, and feel like that yeah that's a choice, that's like a shorthand choice for like a guy who is scared to live his life as himself or just yeah needs someone else, is lonely, those sorts of things. I wanted to show with
Uh,
Riley's house that he's not lonely, he's not and he's not sad all the time. It's just he's sad right now because his dad died.
that does segue into two questions, and I know we're getting a lot in the chat, so we'll start kind of looking through those in a second. Um, One, this book obviously had portrayals of mental health issues with Riley, and they just felt very different from, you had Ryan, who I think had anxiety, has like clinical anxiety, and then you have Ilya, who has depression. And if I missed anybody, I apologize in terms of your
Those would be the
characters.
main ones, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But like,
All of my
how did
characters should see a therapist, but those are the two that did.
one of my favorite, like, for a long time baseball players, like somebody asked him about like having anxiety because he has anxiety. He goes, "Do pitchers are there pitchers without anxiety?" Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you make a good point, sir. But yeah, his sort of like mental health concerns felt very different from Ilya and Ryan's. Like, how did you kind of go about thinking about like what to show, what to maybe like put in that like convene like large 12-year gap between them?
Yeah, so for Riley, I he also suffers from depression, but he has kind of an additional kind of emotional dysregulation disorder, that kind of a general disorder that he just has a hard time feeling large emotions, processing large emotions like anger or sadness or even happiness. Um, so it's something that he struggled with when he played hockey, and it's something that he's obviously struggling with this a particular week where the book is set because of his dad dying. So and then Adam shows up, and that's going to set off a whole new bunch of emotions that are going to be piled on top of it. But I also established that Riley has been um, seeking treatment for this for a while. He's with a therapist. He takes medication, so he's able to manage this stuff way better than when he was a younger man. Um, and he made the choice to leave hockey to deal with his mental health issues and also his addiction issues. He doesn't drink anymore. So uh, yeah, I think it maybe like went a little darker in some ways, but also um, I think I just wanted to show somebody who'd like had been dealing with it for more than a decade. Because my other characters, it was sort of something new that they were kind of dealing with on the fly while still playing hockey. And this is somebody who, was able to take the time to deal with it really well. But still, I wanted to show, it's not like he's fixed. It's like this is still something he's going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think you did a really good job of that. Sorry, my internet is apparently deciding to cut in and out, so I
It's
apologize.
okay.
Uh yeah, I think you did a really good job of kind of showing that and kind of showing that, as you said, like he's not fixed. He is still dealing with it, but he's in maintenance mode, right? He's in sort of like, I have therapy, I have medication, I have sort of like an acknowledgement and like being able to even just like name what he's going through, that he didn't have when he was younger, without necessarily like, there's not a huge amount of like page time, particularly in the flashbacks, for instance, like devoted to that. It's sort of like you see it at the beginning and you see it at the sort of like stasis point that he has reached. And I think that a 12-year time jump can be very helpful for that. Um,
Yeah, and I think just the time where it does take place too, because a lot has changed since the 2000s, like the aughts, and when they were originally playing together. And at that time, definitely no NHL players were talking about their mental health. Like that was not something that was discussed much, and they probably wouldn't have had the language or anything or any kind of guesses as to what was making Riley struggle at that time. And then to today, when they might have a much better understanding of that stuff, thankfully.
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know, because it's what, like, it was like Bell Let's Talk Day. Is that
That's
relatively
a
new?
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess it's about a decade old. I can't remember, but that's definitely like, I mean, as much as that's just like a corporate thing, it's like also
Mm.
is a day where a lot of NHL players talk about mental health, and I'm like, you know what, baby steps. It's like I'll take it.
Yeah. And again, this is very different in baseball than it used to be. It used to be basically like rub some dirt on it was the sort of like prevailing thing, which was just like, oh yeah. And now in
Hmm.
baseball, you've had a couple players who have gone on the injured list for anxiety, right?
Yeah,
And
and you've had
so
that in the
yeah,
NHL too. So yeah, it's nice that players are talking about it. Like players have taken time off for anxiety, for depression, have retired for those reasons, for OCD, for all sorts of things that definitely they were never talking about before. So um, it's definitely a positive change, but
um,
still probably not most of the players in the league. I'm gonna guess talking about it.
yeah. And I assume there's still like the old man commentary that is like, rub some dirt on it. And you're just like, okay, maybe we don't do that.
Yeah, there's definitely players who, have been open about their struggles that, certain segment of the fan base is not sympathetic to them. But um, you know, there's always going to be those people.
Well, before we dive into questions, because there's a bunch in the chat that I might want to make sure we get to. This this book is, I think, standalone from, I know from Game Changers, it's standalone from Time to Shine as well. So
Yeah,
different universes.
It's totally its own thing. The Toronto teams, I think, have different names. I'm pretty sure. If I even named the Toronto team in Time to Shine, I forget.
I guess my question was, which of your, for Riley and Adam, who would be their friends in your other books, and who would be their enemies in your other books?
Well, it's funny because I do think Riley, I didn't even realize this till I was halfway through writing the book, and then I just shrugged and went with it anyway. But I was like, Riley is basically Ryan Price 2.0, from Tough Guy. He's very similar. It's he's a Nova Scotian small town defenseman with red hair and a beard, and he's quit hockey early because he was suffering from depression and other things and mental health issues. And he was he was a big physical kind of bruiser of a defenseman. And I guess it was a way to kind of write that a similar character, but in a different situation. So kind of and get a lot more Nova Scotian into the book. But I don't know why, halfway, his name's Riley, the other guy's name's Ryan. I don't know why it took me many chapters to figure this out. But they're not the same character. They're pretty different characters, but there's all of those components make them very similar. But yeah, so maybe they'd be friends. They're the same guy. But yeah, I think I feel Scott Hunter from Game Changer is kind of somebody who can be friends with anybody. I think everybody kind of respects him. I think he's kind of a similar character to Adam in a lot of ways. Yeah, I don't know, because it's a lot of my other characters are quite young, so they would have to be it would have to be when they were younger that they were friends with them.
Yeah, Scott was the broadly respectable, square jawed kind of.
Yeah, he's your basic respectable generic hockey player.
How about enemies?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Ilya's going to be everybody's enemy, I think. And I mean, Troy's not easy to get along with from Role Model, so I could see him being somebody that they don't like. You have to get to know Troy to like him. So, but I'd like to think that they'd all be friends eventually.
Yeah, I'm sure Ilya would say something insulting but casually devastating on the ice, and then they would eventually become friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a bunch of questions in the chat.
Okay.
So if we wanna dive into this, you've touched on this a little bit, but how do you, and I know you said you wrestled with this book in particular, but how do you go about creating characters? Is it lists? Is it diagrams? Is it just right into the darkness? How do you go about doing that?
For characters, largely that's my starting point. I'm not a plotter, which I've mentioned that before. I am terrible at plotting out a book. I usually just have the characters in my head and I just jump into them. I know for this book, I was writing another book, the book that's never going to get finished because it's a total mess. And I just the opening scene at the funeral popped into my head, and these two characters, and I was just I just got to write this one chapter just to get it out of my system. And I was and I'll save it somewhere, and it can maybe be my next book. And then I wrote it, and I was I need to keep going with this. So I just told my publisher, I was I'm not writing that other book anymore. I'm writing this one, and it's going to be a lot better. And yeah, so for this one, it was the characters kind of arrived fully formed, and that happened with Shane and Ilya for sure. Other books, it took a while. I know with Role Model, Troy and Harris were actually well, especially Harris was really hard to figure out. So yeah, sometimes it's just I mean, most of the time for me, it's like the two characters are there, and then not to sound like cheesy, but it's like I let them tell me their story, kind
Mm.
of like I just like writing the characters and see what they kind of come up with. And I'd say for this particular book, I did end up having to do a lot more plotting. Like as after I wrote the first bunch of chapters, I was like, okay, I really do need to sit down and plot out the rest of this book because it's such a tight timeline. And I need to figure out what's going to happen after this 1 week. So it did take me a while to figure that part out, but I was helped by having two pretty strong, pretty fully formed lead characters in my head.
Um, well, and to kind of, I guess, dovetail on that, do you, for like keeping track of timelines, do you have any like tricks that you have, particularly for like across books? Like, please tell me. I would like to know because
Like a
mine
million
is
post-it notes. I don't know. I would actually no. I'll tell you one trick that has worked for me for every book, and I especially recommend it for sports romance. Create like a Google Calendar that's just the fictional events or the fictional season of your sports team, and like put in all the games, put in like any major events that are going to happen in your book, lay them out in the calendar, and that really helps me because I will completely lose track of like what happened when, how long ago it was. Like, does it make any sense that that their relationship is at this stage if this only happened like 2 days ago, like, or did this happen like way too long ago? Like, if I keep it all in a calendar, it's like I know when stuff happens. So I have a whole bunch of I have like a Google Calendar for every book I've written pretty much. So that's a helpful tool I find. Although I do, and you can easily move things around in a Google Calendar, which I like. And usually I just abandon it at some point, but it's a good starting point.
I'm gonna try again. Camera, we're gonna see. I think you've mentioned it before because I'm in the stage in drafting where I'm like, this book has been in mid-September for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
It can't still be September 15th. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is future Katie's problem. It is not present Katie's problem, but it's gonna be a problem.
I think I have a distinct memory of when I was writing Tough Guy because that was a book that was really fighting me on the pacing. I just like had an event that was happening like 2 days apart, and I just like dragged it down 2 weeks later, and I was like, the whole book's fixed. I was just like, that was it. It just needed time to breathe. I was like, it just made no sense that this was happening 2 days later, just 2 weeks later. And I was like, and I don't have to write anything in between those 2 weeks. It's just going to be 2 weeks later. This happened. Like, yeah. So I was like, just things like that can really help.
Yeah, I think like also like imagine they went on a road trip and came back. I don't need to like, get them to the hotel. I don't need to get them to the rink. I don't need to get them on various buses. They went and they came back.
And like when you're writing, especially something that spans like a whole season, it's like you need to pick which weeks you're writing about because otherwise that book's going to be a billion words. Like, so yeah,
well,
I think that's the thing about sports.
that does get to the question of would you ever write something that takes place like not sports?
Oh yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I'm hoping my next book will be, um, just to switch it up. I think I'm tapped out for hockey ideas at the like I can't think of anything else to say about hockey at the moment. So I think I might try something else with the next book.
What if they were werewolves who played hockey?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would mix it up a bit. Paranormal would be really fun. I think that would be a fun genre to write in.
I would really appreciate. I would love if you wrote a paranormal book. I would
That'd be
eat that
fun.
up with a spoon. As somebody who loves paranormal, and I like that it's coming back a little bit in trad romance, but I think like India's like out there killing it with the paranormal stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I yeah, that's mostly what I read. Like I don't read a lot of just straightforward contemporary romance. I read a lot. I read a lot of historical, but I read a lot of paranormal and fantasy and sci-fi. I like weird stuff. I like stuff with magic.
Um, I like the stakes are just higher. I read sort of very similarly of lots of historical, yeah, lots of paranormal, a lot of sports. But I'm like, and this is not to like, it just requires a higher skill level for authors to be like, these two office workers have a project and I care about the project. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't necessarily want to see them do a PowerPoint. Um, like
need
you
to
have
come
to
up with
be
a really compelling
very
reason. Yeah.
like you have to make me really care about it. And like some people absolutely can, but it's just like a higher skill level, I think, than like werewolves in space. I'm like, I'm already in it. I'm already in. What do you do
Yeah,
about the moon? Like,
writing contemporary away from sports, I don't know. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know. Like just regular contemporary without the sports might be tricky for me because I do think I would be writing the book about it like a PowerPoint presentation because it's like I don't know what my inspiration would be. My real life is not that interesting. So it's like I don't know what I'd be drawing inspiration from. Um so yeah, I don't know. But I definitely would like to try something that's not sports.
all right. Well, I'm looking forward to werewolf hockey in space because I
Okay.
heard you said that you were going to write that.
Yeah, space
Uh,
is that's the twist. Nobody's done that. I've seen
I was
werewolf
going to
hockey.
say, have people done werewolf hockey? And then I was like,
Yeah,
I know that many parts of the internet have
there's
probably done
everything hockey.
a lot of werewolf hockey.
Do you know how many hockey
Uh,
romance books came out this month or are coming out in March? 100. Just hockey romance. Just in March. So I mean, yeah, I think everything hockey has been covered. It's a
including
lot.
and
It's a lot of
especially
books.
werewolves. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
maybe
well, I
not
think
space
we're
though.
again. I'm giving the ideas away here. Like,
Yeah,
I want the werewolves go into heat. This is maybe a different conversation. It's like, um, I think we have to wrap up, but we had a question about how you're feeling about the upcoming TV adaptation. And for people who don't know about that, can you talk a little bit about it?
I could talk a tiny bit about it because it hasn't been officially announced yet, but it is definitely happening. I don't want people to think it's like not not definite. It's definitely happening. It's definitely starting to film very soon. Like I'm talking like next month probably. But they're just in the middle of casting at the moment, and that needs to be finalized before they announce anything. So once that's done, but I'm extremely excited about it because like it's kind of a dream project because it's like I was approached like by the person who's writing, directing, and producing it, like contacted me out of the blue because they were a fan of the books and just really wanted to do this. And they're really passionate about it, and the scripts are fantastic. And yeah, it's going to be for Crave, which in Canada, that's a big streamer. Like that's our biggest Canadian streaming service. It's owned by Bell, so it's pretty big. It's where like HBO streams in Canada and Hulu and stuff. So um, yeah, it's not a small thing, and hopefully somebody in America will pick it up. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm going to get to visit the set in May, which I'm really excited to see. But yeah, the whole thing's been like a surreal dream that I still can't believe is happening. But
That
but
is
I
really
will,
cool.
yeah. But fans have nothing to worry about. They are totally doing everything right. Like like it's very respectful to the source material. So I think people who like the books will be very happy. And it's gonna be
Um,
pretty spicy. So they're not toning that down. So
I was gonna ask about how they were planning to do that for what I assume
they're
is
gonna
something that
do
is the
it.
equivalent.
Just gonna go for it.
Well, I am looking forward to that. And that's really cool that they're just like a fan and we're like, we would like to make your show. We can do a show, and you're like, I would like that too. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I was like, sure. Like, I was like, I didn't think it was filmable, really. So I'm glad that somebody told me otherwise.
Well, if any TV producers are out there and they're like, you know what the world needs? A baseball catcher nail polish bondage scene.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
hit me up. But I think we
Well, I'm
gotta
hoping
wrap up.
this will create a demand for. Yeah, that's. Are we? I hope we answered enough questions.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope,
But I
no, I'm
think
done.
we're in the midst of wrapping up because Ariana's off or on camera now. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Katie and Rachel. It was truly a pleasure getting to listen in on your conversation. And everyone, please go out and buy The Shots You Take. Read it if you haven't read it already. It's a great novel. I just wanted to make note of two specials regarding Rachel Reed's books we have for this upcoming week before we close out this event. The first is that all of LSA's in-stock backlist of Rachel Reed is now 50% off for the next week. No code needed. So please go out and buy any of Rachel Reed's books. And then our second special is that the first 10 people who buy The Shots You Take will get a signed book plate. So if you haven't bought it already, or if you want the opportunity to get a signed book plate, please go out and order that. Okay. Thank you,
Well,
everyone.
thank you so much. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you. It was good chatting with you.
Yeah, you
Thank
can.
you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, morning, midday, wherever you are. And